My name is Hannah, and I'm 34 years old. For the past 5 years, I've been working at the National Archives and Records Administration. It's a job I've always enjoyed, surrounded by history and important documents. But lately, I've been feeling like something's missing in my life. I lost my parents when I was in my early 20s. It was a car accident, sudden and devastating. Since then, I've been on my own, throwing myself into my work and trying not to think about how lonely I felt. But as I approached my mid-30s, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I wanted a family of my own. "Hannah, you coming to the break room? We're having cake for Jim's birthday," my colleague, Lisa, called out. As I followed Lisa to the break room, I couldn't help but notice how she kept glancing at her phone, probably texting her husband. I felt a pang of envy. The break room was crowded with my coworkers, all chatting and laughing. Jim, a balding man in his 50s, was cutting the cake. "Here you go, Hannah," he said, handing me a slice. "You know, my nephew's about your age. Single too. Maybe I should introduce you too?" I forced a smile. "Thanks, Jim, but I'm okay." This wasn't the first time a coworker had tried to set me up. I'd been on a few dates with guys from work, but they all seemed, well, not what I was looking for. Too focused on their careers, or too immature. I wanted someone stable, someone who understood the value of family. Later that day, as I was organizing some files, my supervisor, Mr. Johnson, approached my desk. "Hannah, I've got a new case for you. A farmer from upstate is looking for information on a neighboring plot. Says it's abandoned and he wants to buy it. Think you can handle it?" I nodded. "Of course, Mr. Johnson. I'll get right on it." "Good. He'll be coming in tomorrow morning. His name's Daniel Miller." As Mr. Johnson walked away, I couldn't help but feel a little excited. A farmer. That was different from our usual clients. I wondered what he'd be like. The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. I'd spent extra time on my appearance, though I tried to convince myself it was just another day. As I settled at my desk, my colleague Lisa gave me a knowing look. "Someone's looking nice today," she teased. "Hot date?" I rolled my eyes. "No, just meeting a new client. A farmer looking for property records." Just then, Mr. Johnson appeared with a man I assumed must be Daniel Miller. My jaw nearly dropped. This was not the old, bearded farmer I'd imagined. Daniel was tall, probably in his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. He wore jeans and a plaid shirt, looking somewhat out of place in our office full of suits. "Hannah, this is Mr. Miller," Mr. Johnson introduced us. "He'll be working with you on finding those property records." Daniel extended his hand. "Please, call me Dan." "It's nice to meet you, Hannah." His handshake was firm, his hands calloused from hard work. I felt a flutter in my stomach that I quickly tried to squash. "Nice to meet you too, Dan. Shall we get started?" As we settled into my workspace, I couldn't help but notice how Dan's presence seemed to fill the room. He had a quiet confidence about him that was intriguing. "So, tell me about this property you're interested in," I prompted, trying to keep things professional. Dan leaned forward, his eyes lighting up. "It's the plot next to my farm. Been abandoned for years. I'm hoping to expand, maybe start an orchard. But first, I need to track down the owners." As he spoke, I found myself drawn in by his passion. It was refreshing to see someone so enthusiastic about their work. We spent the next few hours poring over old property records. Dan was surprisingly knowledgeable, asking insightful questions that made our search easier. As we worked, we fell into an easy conversation. "So, how long have you been farming?" I asked during a lull. Dan's face softened. "Born and raised on a farm. Took over from my dad about 15 years ago. It's not always easy, but I love it." There was something in his tone that made me curious. "Sounds like there's a story there." He hesitated for a moment. "Well, it's just me and my boys now. My wife, she passed away a few years back. My heart clenched. I'm so sorry, Dan. That must be hard. He nodded, a sad smile on his face. It is. But my boys, they keep me going. They're 7 and 5 now. Great kids. I felt a wave of sympathy wash over me. I lost my parents years ago. I know it's not the same, but I understand loss. The rest of the day flew by. We made good progress on the property search, but it was clear we'd need more time. As Dan was leaving, he hesitated. Listen, Hannah. I know this is unconventional, but would you like to grab a coffee sometime? To discuss the case, of course. I felt my heart skip a beat. I'd like that, Dan. For the case, of course. Over the next few weeks, Dan and I met regularly, ostensibly to work on his property case. But our conversations often strayed beyond land records and legal documents. I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone in years. One day, as we were wrapping up our work, Dan hesitated. Hannah, I hope I'm not overstepping, but would you like to come out to the farm this weekend? Meet the boys? We're having a little barbecue, nothing fancy. My heart raced. This felt like a big step. I'd love to, Dan. Are you sure the boys would be okay with it? He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. They've been asking to meet you. I may have mentioned you once or twice. That Saturday, I found myself driving out to Dan's farm. The city gradually gave way to rolling hills and open fields. As I pulled up to the farmhouse, I saw Dan and 2 young boys waiting on the porch. Hannah, Dan called out, waving. Come meet the boys. I stepped out of the car, suddenly nervous. The younger boy hid behind Dan's leg, while the older one eyed me curiously. Boys, this is Miss Hannah from the archives. Hannah, these are my sons, Jack and Tommy. Jack, the older boy, stepped forward. Do you really work with old stuff all day? That's cool. I laughed, feeling myself relax. I do. Maybe I can show you some interesting documents sometime. Tommy, still shy, peeked out from behind Dan. Do you like chickens? We have chickens. And just like that, the ice was broken. The boys led me on a tour of the farm, showing me their favorite spots and introducing me to various animals. Dan followed behind, a soft smile on his face. As the day went on, I found myself falling into an easy rhythm with Dan and the boys. We grilled burgers, played catch in the yard, and ended the evening roasting marshmallows over a small fire. As the boys dozed off on a blanket nearby, Dan and I sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. Thank you for today, I said softly. It's been wonderful. Dan turned to me, his face serious. Hannah, I need to be honest with you. I like you. A lot. And I think you might feel the same. But I need you to understand, the boys and I, we're a package deal. It's not always easy, being a single dad and a farmer. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. Dan, I like you too. And your boys are amazing. I know it won't be easy, but I'd like to see where this goes. If you want to, that is. Dan's face broke into a wide smile. He reached out, taking my hand in his. I'd like that very much, Hannah. The months that followed were like a dream. Dan and I grew closer, and I found myself spending more and more time at the farm. The boys, Jack and Tommy, warmed up to me quickly, and I discovered a maternal instinct I never knew I had. One crisp autumn evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Dan turned to me with a serious expression. Hannah, these past 6 months have been the happiest I've had in years. I know it might seem fast, but when you know, you know. Hannah Thompson, will you marry me? Tears welled up in my eyes. Yes, Dan. Yes, I'll marry you. The wedding was a simple affair, held on the farm with only our closest friends and family present. As I walked down the makeshift aisle in a simple white dress, I saw Dan waiting for me, looking handsome in his suit. Jack and Tommy stood beside him, beaming. However, my joy was slightly dampened when I overheard Dan's parents talking during the reception. "She's awfully thin, isn't she?" his mother muttered. "Not sure she's cut out for farm life." "Give her time, Martha," his father replied. "She'll toughen up or she'll break." I tried to shake off their words, focusing instead on the happiness of the day. But a seed of doubt had been planted. After the honeymoon, I moved to the farm permanently. It was a big adjustment, leaving my job and city life behind. Dan suggested I quit working to focus on the house and children, and I agreed, eager to embrace my new role as wife and stepmother. At first, everything seemed perfect. I threw myself into farm life, learning to cook hearty meals, tend to the vegetable garden, and even help with some of the lighter farm work. The boys seemed to thrive under my care, and I loved reading to them at night and helping with their homework. But as weeks turned into months, I began to feel the strain. The work was endless and grueling. I'd never realized how much physical labor went into running a farm. My hands, once soft from office work, became calloused and rough. Dan's parents, who lived nearby, were frequent visitors. His mother, Martha, took every opportunity to criticize my efforts. "You call this a proper farm breakfast?" She'd scoff at my attempts at cooking. "In my day, we'd have had 3 different kinds of meat on the table by now." I tried to brush off her comments, but they stung. Dan, busy with the farm work, seemed oblivious to my struggles. One particularly difficult day, as I was struggling to wrangle a stubborn cow into the barn, Dan called out from the tractor. "Come on, Hannah, put your back into it. Food doesn't just appear on the table, you know." I bit back a retort, feeling a mix of frustration and hurt. This wasn't the life I had imagined when I said "I do." That night, as I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. I'd lost weight, my hair was a mess, and there were dark circles under my eyes. The manicured nails and styled hair of my city life seemed like a distant memory. As the months wore on, the demands of farm life began to take their toll. I was up before dawn each day, preparing breakfast for Dan and the boys, packing lunches, and then diving into a never-ending list of chores. Feeding animals, cleaning coops and stalls, helping with the crops, it was relentless. One particularly grueling day, I woke up feeling awful. My head was pounding, and I could feel a fever coming on. But as I lay in bed, contemplating calling in sick, to whom, I wasn't sure, I heard a sharp knock at the bedroom door. "Hannah, are you planning to sleep all day?" It was Martha, my mother-in-law. I groaned, forcing myself to sit up. "I'm not feeling well, Martha. I think I might have a fever." She burst into the room, her face a mask of disapproval. "Nonsense. In this family, only death is an excuse not to work. Now get up and make me some breakfast. Then there's work to be done in the yard." Stunned and feeling too weak to argue, I dragged myself out of bed. As I mechanically prepared Martha's breakfast, I could feel my body protesting every movement. "Here you go," I said, placing a plate of eggs and bacon in front of her. She took one bite and grimaced. "Overcooked. But it'll have to do. Now get out there and earn your keep." I stumbled out into the yard, my vision blurry and my body aching. The world seemed to spin as I made my way to the chicken coop. As I bent down to clean it out, a wave of nausea hit me. I barely made it out of the coop before vomiting. Wiping my mouth, I looked up to see Dan watching me from the tractor. "You okay?" he called out. I shook my head weakly. "I think I'm sick, Dan. I need to lie down." He frowned. "We can't afford for you to be sick right now, Hannah. The work needs to get done. Just push through it." Tears stung my eyes as I watched him turn back to his work. I felt so alone, so unsupported. This wasn't the man I'd fallen in love with. That night, as I lay in bed, my fever raging, it was Jack and Tommy who took care of me. They brought me water and cold compresses, their little faces creased with worry. "Are you gonna be okay, Hannah?" Tommy asked, his voice small. I managed a weak smile. "I'll be fine, sweetheart. Thank you for taking care of me." As the boys left the room, I heard Dan's voice in the hallway. "Boys, leave Hannah alone. She needs to rest so she can get back to work tomorrow." In that moment, something inside me snapped. This wasn't the life I wanted. This wasn't the family I dreamed of. I needed to make a change. But just as I'd made this resolution, life threw me another curveball. A few weeks later, as I was getting ready for another day of endless chores, a wave of nausea hit me. But this time, it wasn't from illness. With shaking hands, I took a pregnancy test. As I waited for the results, my mind raced. A baby? Now? How could I handle a newborn on top of everything else? When the test showed positive, I felt a mix of joy and terror. I had hoped for some reprieve from the grueling farm work, but my expectations were quickly dashed. If anything, the demands on me seemed to increase. "You're eating for two now," Martha would say, piling more work on my plate. "That means you should be working for two as well." I was 7 months along when Dan's father approached me one afternoon. "Hannah, we need to clear out the old storage room for the baby. Get to it, will you?" Exhausted and aching, I nodded silently and made my way to the cluttered room. As I sorted through years of accumulated junk, I came across a dusty old box tucked away in the corner. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside, I found a leather-bound book. As I flipped it open, my heart nearly stopped. It was a diary belonging to Marie, Dan's first wife. I knew I shouldn't read it, but something compelled me to do so. As I began to read, tears started streaming down my face. Marie's words painted a picture of a life not unlike my own: endless work, constant criticism, and a husband who seemed oblivious to her struggles. But as I read on, the entries became darker. "The pain is unbearable," one entry read. "I begged Dan to take me to a doctor, but he says we can't afford it. His parents say I'm just being weak. But I know something is wrong. I can feel it." My hand shook as I turned the pages. The final entry made my blood run cold. "I can't take it anymore. The pain, the work, the loneliness. They won't let me get help, won't even buy me medicine, because it's an unnecessary expense. I'm sorry, my sweet boys, but I can't go on like this. Dan, your parents, this is on you. I hope you can live with what you've done." I closed the diary, feeling sick to my stomach. This wasn't just a diary, it was a suicide note. Marie hadn't died from an illness as I'd been told. She had taken her own life, driven to desperation by the very people I was now living with. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. The way Dan and his parents treated me, their callousness towards my health and well-being, it wasn't new. They had done this before, and it had cost a woman her life. I carefully hid the diary in my room, my mind racing. I couldn't let history repeat itself. I couldn't become another Marie. 2 months had passed since I gave birth to my daughter, Emily. The joy of motherhood was overshadowed by the relentless demands of farm life. Night and day blurred together as I struggled to care for a newborn while still tending to Jack and Tommy, cooking meals, cleaning the house, and managing the endless chores that came with the animals. One afternoon, as I was hanging laundry outside, I heard raised voices coming from the barn. Curiosity and concern propelled me forward, and I crept closer to listen. "You killed her," Jack's young voice cracked with emotion. "You and Grandma and Grandpa, you killed Mom." The sharp sound of a slap echoed through the air, followed by Dan's furious voice. "Don't you dare say that again, boy. You think you're so smart, huh? Well, if you're too smart for your own good, maybe you don't need school anymore." My heart raced as I listened, frozen in place. Dan continued his tirade, his voice growing louder. "From now on, you'll work on the farm full-time. You'll earn your keep like the rest of us. You don't need an education to work here. You'll learn what really matters, how to put food on the table." I felt sick to my stomach. Jack was only 9 years old. The thought of him being denied an education, forced to work full-time on the farm, it was unthinkable. The next morning, Dan announced he was leaving for a 3-day farm produce fair with his parents. As soon as their truck disappeared down the driveway, I sprang into action. "Jack, Tommy," I called, my voice surprisingly steady. "Pack a bag with your favorite things. We're going on a trip." As the boys scrambled to pack, I gathered Emily's essentials and a few of our belongings. I retrieved Marie's diary from its hiding place and tucked it safely into my bag. Within an hour, we were in my old car, driving away from the farm. The boys were quiet, sensing the gravity of the situation. Emily slept peacefully in her car seat, oblivious to the turmoil around her. Using my meager savings, I rented a small apartment in the city. It was cramped and nothing like the farmhouse, but it was ours, and it was safe. The next day, I reached out to my old contacts at the archive. They were surprised to hear from me, but eager to help. With their assistance, I managed to track down information about Marie's parents. My hand shook as I dialed the number. A warm, elderly voice answered. "Hello? Mrs. Johnson? This is Hannah. I was married to your son-in-law, Dan." There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "Is everything all right? We've been trying to get in touch with the boys for years. Dan cut us off after Marie, after we lost her. Please, can we see them?" It turned out the Johnsons lived in a neighboring town. They invited us to visit, eager to reunite with their grandchildren and meet Emily. The moment we arrived at the Johnsons' house, I felt a wave of warmth and acceptance wash over us. Marie's parents, Ellen and Robert, greeted us with open arms and tear-filled eyes. "Oh, look at you all," Ellen exclaimed, hugging Jack and Tommy tightly. "You've grown so much." Robert gently took Emily from my arms, cradling her with the practiced ease of a grandfather. "And this little one, she's beautiful, Hannah." Once we were settled inside, I knew it was time. With shaking hands, I pulled Marie's diary from my bag. "There's something you need to see," I said softly, holding out the diary to Ellen. As they read, their expressions changed from curiosity to horror to grief. Tears streamed down Ellen's face, while Robert's jaw clenched in anger. "We knew something was wrong," Ellen whispered. "But we never imagined, oh, Marie." Just then, my phone rang. It was Dan. I steeled myself and answered. "Where the hell are you?" he growled. "Get back home now, or I'm calling the police." I felt a surge of courage. "No, Dan. I'm not coming back. In fact, I'll be the one contacting the police. Don't call me again." I hung up, my heart racing. Over the next few days, with the Johnsons' support, I set our plan in motion. I contacted Child Protective Services, providing detailed accounts of the abuse and neglect the children had suffered. Then, clutching Marie's diary, I walked into the local police station. The detective listened gravely as I recounted everything: the forced labor, the medical neglect, Marie's suicide. "This is extremely serious," the detective said. "We'll need to investigate thoroughly. Are you willing to press charges?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "For all of us." What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Dan and his parents were arrested and brought in for questioning. The farm was searched, and more evidence of abuse was uncovered. The boys were interviewed by child psychologists, bravely recounting their experiences. It was heart-wrenching to hear their stories, but I was so proud of their courage. Finally, after months of legal proceedings, we found ourselves in the courtroom for the final verdict. I sat between Ellen and Robert, holding Emily close, with Jack and Tommy on either side of us. The judge's voice rang out clearly. "In light of the overwhelming evidence, this court finds the defendants guilty of child abuse, neglect, labor exploitation, and criminally negligent homicide in the death of Marie Johnson." I heard Ellen's sharp intake of breath beside me. The judge continued. "Daniel Miller is sentenced to 10 years in prison. His parents, Martha and George Miller, are each sentenced to 7 years." As the gavel came down, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, sadness, and hope. I looked at the boys, seeing a weight lift from their young shoulders. In the aftermath of the trial, our lives began to take on a new shape. Marie's parents were godsends. They opened their home to us, providing a safe haven as we navigated the choppy waters of our new reality. "Your family now, Hannah," Ellen said one evening, as we sat on their porch watching the kids play in the yard. "We're here for you, whatever you need." Their support was unwavering. They helped with childcare during the seemingly endless court proceedings and meetings with lawyers. Robert would often take Jack and Tommy fishing, giving them a chance to just be kids again. Ellen doted on baby Emily, singing her the same lullabies she once sang to Marie. With their encouragement, I hired a skilled divorce lawyer. The Johnsons insisted on covering the legal fees. The divorce proceedings were mercifully straightforward, given Dan's incarceration. When it was finalized, I was awarded full custody of all 3 children and substantial compensation from Dan's assets. As much as I appreciated the Johnsons' hospitality, I knew it was time for us to stand on our own feet. Using part of the settlement money, I rented a comfortable apartment in the city, close to my old workplace and a well-regarded school. The day I walked back into the National Archives felt like coming home. My colleagues welcomed me with open arms, and my boss was more than accommodating about my need for a flexible schedule. Enrolling the kids in school was a bittersweet moment. Jack and Tommy were excited but nervous, having been out of formal education for so long. Emily started at a nearby daycare. I'll never forget the lump in my throat as I watched them all head off that first morning, their backpacks seeming too big for their small shoulders. Ellen and Robert were frequent visitors, their presence a constant reminder that we weren't alone. They doted on all 3 children equally, showering them with the grandparental love they'd been denied for so long. One Sunday afternoon, as we all sat around the living room after a big family lunch, Robert cleared his throat. "Hannah, Ellen and I have been talking," he began, looking slightly nervous. "We've updated our will. We want you and the kids to be taken care of, no matter what happens." I was stunned. "But I'm not." Ellen reached out and squeezed my hand. "You're our daughter now, Hannah. And those are our grandchildren. We want to make it official." Tears welled up in my eyes as the magnitude of their gesture hit me. This was what family was supposed to be, unconditional love and support. As I looked around the room at the faces of my children and these 2 wonderful people who had embraced us so completely, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had been running around all day, making sure everything was perfect for the charity event. The football team I managed was hosting, and it was crucial everything went smoothly. By the time the guests started pouring in, I was already exhausted but had to keep the smile plastered on. I was checking the auction items when I first saw him. John was hard to miss. He was handing out programs at the door, his smile genuine and reaching his eyes. I figured he was just another volunteer, but something about him caught my attention. "Need a hand with those?" His voice was warm as he approached me by the auction table. I looked up, a bit startled. "Oh, thanks, but I think I've got it under control," I said, stacking the last of the brochures. "Sure looks like it," he chuckled, glancing around at the well-organized venue. "John," he extended his hand, which I shook, feeling his firm grip. "Emily," I introduced myself, trying to ignore the little spark that shot through me at the contact. "So, Emily, you run this whole operation?" His eyebrows shot up, clearly impressed. "Yeah, I manage the team and organize these events. It's a lot, but I love it." John nodded, his eyes scanning the room before settling back on me. "Looks like you do a great job. It's nice seeing so much support for a good cause." The conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about the event, the team, and somehow drifted into more personal territories like our favorite movies and books. It was refreshing to talk to someone who was genuinely interested in what I had to say. "So, you volunteer often?" I asked, sipping my drink as we leaned against a high table. "Whenever I can. My buddy dragged me here, but I'm glad he did." John's smile was infectious, and I found myself grinning back. "Dragged? Really, that's the story you're going with?" I teased, raising an eyebrow. He laughed, a sound that was hearty and sincere. Okay, maybe not exactly dragged. I wanted to come. And I'm glad I did, meeting you is a bonus. As the night wore on, I realized I was enjoying myself more than I had at any previous event. It wasn't just the success of the evening, it was John. He was easy to talk to, didn't put on airs, and didn't shy away from showing his interest. His down-to-earth nature was a breath of fresh air in the usual snooty crowds I mingled with. Hey, before this night ends, can I see you again? John's question caught me a bit off guard, not by the content but by the earnestness in his voice. I'd like that, I admitted, my usual guarded self taking a back seat. Great, it's a date then, he said with a confident nod, his smile wide. As I watched him mingle with other guests, thanking them for their contributions, I couldn't help but feel like maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something special. The drive over to John's parents' place was quiet, too quiet. I kept fidgeting with the hem of my skirt, my stomach in knots. John noticed, of course, and reached over to give my hand a reassuring squeeze. It's gonna be fine, Em. They're gonna love you, he said with a smile, but I could tell he was a bit nervous too. As we pulled into the driveway of a tidy suburban home, my anxiety ramped up. John's mom, Martha, and his sister, Karen, were already waiting at the door as we walked up. Their smiles were tight, almost forced. John, and you must be Emily, Martha said, her voice sweet but her eyes scanning me like a hawk. She offered a cheek kiss that barely touched my cheek. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Smith, I managed to say, trying to sound confident. Please, call me Martha. And this is Karen. She gestured to a woman who looked a lot like John, but with sharper edges. Karen's smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she shook my hand. Heard a lot about you, Emily. John can't stop talking. The inside of the house was as neat as the exterior, every piece of furniture and decor perfectly in place. We sat down in the living room, and the small talk started, the kind that pricked at you under the surface. So, Emily, John tells us you manage a football team? That's an interesting choice for a career, Martha said, her tone dripping with something that sounded like disapproval. I shifted in my seat, feeling the weight of her judgment. Yes, I love sports, and it's a fulfilling job. The team is like a family. A family of big, burly men, Karen chimed in, her words sharp. Must be tough, keeping them all in line. I laughed, a bit uneasy. They're not that hard to manage, really. We respect each other a lot. Dinner was served shortly after, and the atmosphere didn't get any lighter. Every question felt like a test, every answer I gave scrutinized. Martha passed the salad. I suppose in your line of work, you don't get much time for finer pursuits? Reading, art? I find time, I said, keeping my tone light. I love reading. And I do enjoy art when I can. Karen snorted softly. What's your favorite book then? I mentioned a recent bestseller, a thriller I'd actually enjoyed quite a bit. Ah, light reading, Karen dismissed it quickly. I prefer classics myself. More depth, you know? I nodded, feeling out of my depth. The meal continued with more of these little jabs, veiled in politeness, but sharp enough to sting. John tried to change the subject a few times, bringing up neutral topics like movies and vacation plans, but the tension hovered like a cloud over the table. After dinner, John and I helped clear the table, and he whispered, "You okay?" "Yeah, just didn't realize it would be an interrogation," I whispered back, trying to smile. We said our goodbyes soon after, Martha's farewell as cool as her welcome. "Lovely to meet you, Emily. We must do this again soon," she said, her smile tight. As John and I walked back to the car, I felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that the evening was over, and frustration that it hadn't gone as I'd hoped. Wedding planning was supposed to be fun, or so I thought. But every decision felt like walking through a minefield with John's mom and his sister having an opinion on everything. From the color of the napkins to the seating arrangements, nothing escaped their scrutiny. "Really, Emily, chartreuse for the bridesmaids?" It's such a vibrant choice, Martha had said one afternoon, eyeing my color swatches like they were toxic waste. I tried to keep my cool, clenching my fists under the table. John likes it. It's lively, don't you think? Karen had snorted, flipping through a bridal magazine. If you're aiming for lively, sure. Most would prefer classy, though. Their comments were like little jabs, constant and stinging. John did his best to back me up, but there were moments I saw him caught in the middle, trying to please everyone. As the big day drew closer, the remarks didn't let up. We were at the final tasting for the wedding menu when Martha brought up the guest list again. So, Emily, you've really invited your entire team? All those men? Her tone was as smooth as silk, but the implication was clear. Yeah, they're a big part of my life, I replied, trying not to let her see she was getting to me. They're looking forward to celebrating with us. Karen chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern. Isn't that a bit inappropriate? I mean, it's your day, but you know, appearances and all. I bit back a sharper retort, settling for, they're just friends, Karen. John knows them well. John jumped in then, his voice firm. Emily's right. They're great guys. Let's focus on the food, huh? How's the chicken? He was trying, I'd give him that. The wedding day itself was a blur of smiles, dances, and thankfully, minimal drama. Martha managed to keep her comments to a minimum, and Karen was too busy judging the flower arrangements to stir up much trouble. At the reception, though, after a few glasses of champagne, Karen found me alone by the bar. Emily, just a heads up, Mom and I will be keeping an eye on things, you know, after the wedding. Her words slurred slightly, but her sharp gaze told me she was sober enough to mean what she said. I frowned, turning to face her fully. What's that supposed to mean, Karen? Just that, we care about John. A lot. We're here to protect him, from whatever might come. She patted my hand in a patronizing way that made my skin crawl. I took a deep breath, counted to 10, and decided to let it go for the night. For John's sake, I plastered on a smile and rejoined the party. The rest of the evening went off without a hitch, and John and I slipped away, finally married and ready to start our life together. As we drove off to our honeymoon, his hand in mine, I felt a mix of joy and apprehension. The wedding was over, but something told me the real challenges were just beginning. The news hit like a wave when I found out I was pregnant. Overjoyed, I couldn't wait to tell John. We'd been talking about starting a family, and this felt like the perfect next chapter for us. John's reaction was everything I hoped for. His eyes lit up, and he lifted me off the ground in a bear hug right in the middle of our kitchen. We're gonna have a baby, he exclaimed, laughter and tears mixing on his face. It was a moment of pure happiness, one I wanted to bottle up and keep forever. But then came the hard part, telling his family. Given the cold shoulder I'd gotten so far, I was nervous. We decided to break the news at a family dinner that Sunday. As we drove over, John squeezed my hand, trying to be reassuring. Whatever happens, we're in this together, right? He said, glancing over at me with a smile. Right, I nodded, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. Dinner was already tense when we arrived. Martha was her usual self, controlling the conversation, while Karen seemed on edge, barely acknowledging my presence. When dessert was served, John decided it was now or never. So, we have some news, he began, his voice steady but filled with excitement. Martha and Karen turned their full attention to us, forks paused midair. We're expecting a baby, I said, managing a smile despite the anxiety. Martha's reaction was hard to read at first. She just sat there, blinking, before forcing a smile. Well, that's wonderful news, she said, her voice a bit too high-pitched. Karen, on the other hand, didn't bother hiding her feelings. A baby, huh? You sure it's John's? Her words cut through the air, sharp and cold. John's face turned red, and he slammed his hand on the table. Karen, what the hell? I felt a chill run down my spine, but I forced myself to speak. Yes, I'm sure. Why would you even say that? Karen shrugged, looking from me to John with a smirk. Well, you work with a lot of men, Emily. It's a fair question. That's out of line, Karen. Totally out of line. John shot back, his tone harsh. Martha intervened then, her voice soothing but with an undercurrent of steel. Now, let's not jump to conclusions. We're just surprised, that's all. Right, Karen? Karen muttered something under her breath and pushed her chair back. I need some air, she announced before stalking off. The rest of the evening went downhill. We left soon after Karen's exit, the car ride home filled with silence and unsaid words. I could tell John was furious and embarrassed, and I didn't know how to comfort him without stirring up more anger. John, I'm sorry about that, I finally said as we neared our house. It's not your fault, Em. It's Karen. She's out of line. We'll handle it, he replied, his grip on the steering wheel tight. As we pulled into our driveway, I couldn't shake off Karen's words or the look in her eye. It was clear she was brewing up a storm, and I had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning. Her question about the baby's paternity was more than just a jab, it was a declaration of war. The weeks following the dinner were a mixed bag. Work kept me busy, and my pregnancy was progressing well, but the tension with John's family, especially Karen, was always lurking in the background. One particularly grueling day at the office, I was wrapping up late. Most of my team had already headed out, and I was looking forward to getting home and putting my feet up. That's when Mike, one of my coaches, popped his head back in the door. Hey, Emily, you heading out soon? I can give you a lift if you need, my route's past your place today. I hesitated for a moment, aware of Karen's insinuations, but then reality kicked in. It was just a ride. Sure, thanks, Mike. I'm just about done here. As we walked to his car, I was grateful for the company. Mike was always easy to talk to, and I needed to unwind after a long day. We chatted about the usual, team stuff, upcoming games, nothing personal. When he dropped me off, I thanked him and thought nothing more of it. That evening, John came home looking stormier than I'd seen him in a long time. He stormed into the kitchen, where I was starting on dinner, and slammed his keys on the counter. Emily, we need to talk, he said, his voice tight. I turned off the stove, my heart sinking. What's wrong, John? He pulled out his phone, showing me a video. It was me, getting into Mike's car. Karen sent me this. She's making claims, Em, about you and Mike. She's saying. I felt sick. The video was harmless, but with Karen's spin, I could imagine what she was suggesting. John, it's nothing. He just gave me a ride home because it was on his way. John ran his hands through his hair, clearly trying to calm himself. I know. It's just, her constant digging and poking. It's just hard, you know? Having my sister turn against my wife like this. The next day, things took a turn for the worse. Karen had escalated her campaign against me by calling our office anonymously, spreading rumors about my inappropriate relationships with the team. My boss pulled me aside, concerned. Emily, you know I don't usually pay attention to gossip, but these calls, they're quite specific. Is everything all right? I reassured him, angry and embarrassed, that Karen's lies had reached my workplace. Everything's fine, really. Just some family drama spilling over. I'm sorry it's gotten this far. He nodded, understanding but clearly uncomfortable. All right, just handle it, okay? We can't have this affecting the team. After Karen's anonymous calls, the atmosphere at work changed. It wasn't just the whispers, it was the looks. People I'd worked with for years, who joked around and shared coffee breaks with me, now hesitated, their eyes flicking away too quickly when I caught them staring. I walked into the locker room one day to grab some files when I overheard a couple of the newer team members whispering. Just weird, isn't it? Wonder if it's true what they say about her. One of them muttered, not noticing my approach. I cleared my throat, and they both spun around, their faces going red. If you have something to ask me, do it to my face. Not behind my back, I said, my voice colder than I intended. The taller one, a rookie named Tom, stuttered out an apology. Sorry, Emily. It's just the rumors and all. What, that I'm having affairs with half the team? I snatched the files I came for, slamming the cabinet a little harder than necessary. It's crap, and you do well to remember that. I left them standing there, probably more scared of me now than of any tabloid trash they heard. This was what Karen wanted, to make me doubt myself, to isolate me. I wasn't going to let her win. Back in my office, I tried to focus on the game strategies for the upcoming weekend. But my phone buzzed nonstop, texts from John asking if I was okay, calls from unknown numbers that I started ignoring. The weight of the situation was suffocating. Later, Mike knocked and came in, closing the door softly behind him. He looked serious, which was a departure from his usual easygoing self. Emily, you all right? This talk going around, it's garbage, you know that, right? His concern was genuine, and for a second, I felt my composure waver.